They always forget the copy room. That's the first thing they teach you, if you went through the kind of training I did. People tear through drawers, read emails, crack safes. But no one checks the copy room. They should. That's where it started. My name is Richard Lawson. 52. I work with risk, corporate, governmental, human. My resume doesn't list the company, just coordinates. I'm not a spy. I'm not a bureaucrat. I manage retention. My job is to make sure things don't collapse. But there are many kinds of retention. Sometimes, even of yourself. I always thought it would take something loud to break me, an explosion, a breach, a fire. Turns out it's much quieter. It started with an email with no words. Just a subject line. You know what she's doing? No sender. No attachments. Like someone pulling a trigger in absolute silence. I deleted it. Then cleared the trash. But it stayed, with me, between breath and pulse. I never kept personal things in the office. No photos, no mugs. My desk looked like an ICU bay, sterile, functional. Even the window view was deliberate, parking lot, not skyline. But I had one item in the third drawer. A folder. Dark blue, unmarked. Inside, 2 plane tickets, a passport copy, a note in my father's handwriting, and a key. Not to anything in this country. I'd sworn to only open it if the structure I'd built began cracking, not from the surface, but from the foundation. Not from emotion. From evidence. One morning, the evidence started appearing. That day, I didn't watch people, I watched patterns. A client hesitated too long before signing. A junior analyst requested odd server access. Even the janitor avoided my eyes. It wasn't fear. It was rehearsal. At home, my wife chopped basil. Played music. Asked about my day. I answered. Said something about numbers, reports. She smiled, poured wine. I kissed her on the temple, a second longer than usual. Not because I suspected her, but because I wasn't sure who I could trust. That night I opened the drawer. Took out the folder. The paper still smelled like archive storage. The ink was real. My father's writing, left years ago after his final State Department contract. If the ground shifts beneath you, don't look for who pushed. Move first. I booked a room under a different name. Drove without GPS, paid only in cash. This wasn't paranoia. Paranoia is emotional. This was pattern recognition. And the pattern had changed. 3 days later, another email arrived. Just as faceless. Subject. Copy room. Bottom shelf. I didn't hesitate. I went. And I found something that shouldn't have been there. It was a plain envelope, wedged behind unused reams of printer paper. Heavy. Unmarked. Inside, a single sheet, an internal clearance form. It was dated 2 weeks ago. Access authorization granted to external personnel for archive-level systems. 5 approval tiers. 1 signature. Real ink scanned? Not mine. The name had been partially redacted. Intentionally sloppy. As if they wanted me to guess. But the pen stroke, it was familiar. I'd seen it before. On anniversary cards. On company holiday notes. On a dinner bill. But I couldn't be certain. That was the trap. This wasn't proof. This was suggestion. It was designed to look personal. To make me react. I didn't. I drove with the document in the trunk. Took the long route through side streets. Stopped twice, changed lanes without signaling. Routine. Back at the hotel, I still call it that, though it's more of a safe house, I scanned the paper. No metadata. I ran it through a spectrum analysis filter, found chemical traces of archival ink and 1 synthetic compound common in high-end fountain pens. Then I accessed the company's backup permissions database, using a mirror terminal I'd installed 5 years ago in a different city, under a maintenance contractor's identity. The clearance log showed the access had been granted, but the entry timestamp was off by 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a lifetime in audit logs. enough to clone a signature key and vanish. Which meant either someone spoofed the document using internal tools, or someone inside wanted me to think they had. I made tea from a pouch I didn't trust, let it go cold. Sat cross-legged on the stiff hotel carpet and made a list, mental, not written. Who had access? Who had motive? Who had something to gain from my reaction? 2 names floated. One was expected. One wasn't. I deleted both. Because if someone was setting me up, they'd count on me picking too soon. The safe house room smelled of drywall and recirculated air. The windows had no real view. The bed remained untouched. I slept on the floor. I turned off the lights. Sat in the armchair near the door. Watched the hallway through the peephole. No movement. Just quiet. This was no longer about the document. Whoever sent the emails, whoever planted the paper, wasn't trying to warn me. They were trying to shape what I'd believe next. And the most dangerous kind of lie is the one you almost recognize. The next morning, I placed a tracker inside a dead keycard. Not a new tactic, but one that works when the audience is lazy. I left it on my desk in plain sight. Gave it a story, a return badge from a dismissed temp in records. I filed no paperwork. I made no announcement. Then I waited. By noon, the card moved. Not far. Down 1 floor, across the atrium, into a hallway we hadn't used in 6 months. A server test room. Empty, technically. At 12:43, someone tried to badge in. Access denied? 31 seconds later, a second card succeeded. That wasn't the part that bothered me. What bothered me was who signed off the override. It wasn't anyone from operations. Not legal. Not tech. It came from facilities. A name I hadn't heard in 4 years, Morgan Calhoun. Morgan was quiet. Mid-50s. One of those lifers who blends into the system like wall paint. Clean record. Wore the same tie every Tuesday. I'd assumed he'd retired. Apparently not. I didn't contact him. I didn't even watch the footage. Instead, I requested the server room maintenance log for the last 90 days. Someone had been cycling power every second Thursday. At 2:17 a.m. exactly. No alerts. No known reason. Power cycling isn't dangerous. But it resets everything. Buffers. Caches. Memory logs. It's what you do when you want to disappear. So I left a different kind of signal the following week. Not a card. Not a message. I changed 1 byte in the system firmware. No alert. No flag. Just a subtle break in the boot sequence. Something that would trigger only if someone restarted the system manually. Then I waited. At 2:17 a.m., the log pinged. Reboot attempt. Failure. Location, server room B. But this time, the footage was already queued. And what I saw wasn't Morgan. It was someone I'd seen that same afternoon, bringing coffee to my wife's desk. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor beside the bed, watching the footage loop on my screen. The man with the coffee tray, he moved like he belonged. No tension, no nerves. The kind of calm that doesn't come from innocence. It comes from routine. I reviewed his face against our employee directory. Nothing. Checked against third-party vendors. Nothing. Searched the footage of the front lobby. He never signed in. No visitor badge. No delivery log. No camera at the door caught his arrival. He was in the building, then he wasn't. Ghost protocol. I dressed before sunrise. Neutral tones. Unmemorable. I kept my face low and used the old tram entrance, disused, ignored. Security cameras there haven't worked since 2019. On purpose. I walked 3 blocks to the flower shop across from our HQ, ordered nothing. Just stood inside, pretending to inspect roses, watching the glass doors across the street. He returned. Same stride. Same tray. But this time, he didn't go to her floor. He stopped 2 levels below. Logistics. I noted the time. 9:14 a.m. Then I left. Quickly. No confrontation. I had what I needed, pattern, not confrontation. Back at the hotel, I found the envelope. Not in the mailbox. Not under the door. On the pillow. It was cream-colored, thick paper. Handwritten. My name. Not Mr. Lawson. Not a title. Just Richard. No postage. No mark. I opened it with a letter knife I hadn't used in years. The blade was still sharp. Inside, one sheet. Also handwritten. 4 words. Look under the fountain. There was no signature. Only a faint scent. A hint of tobacco and old ink. The kind my father used. And suddenly, I remembered something small. A month ago. My wife said she'd be working late. Team review, policy draft, something about onboarding protocols. I asked if she needed a ride. She said no. Her tone was neutral, too neutral. Now I wonder if that was the first time he brought her coffee. I didn't move. Not yet. Because someone had just stepped through my final line of defense. And they did it without a sound. I didn't go straight to the fountain. I made 3 stops. 2 random, 1 planned. I needed to see if I was being followed. I needed to remember the pattern of shadows across familiar buildings. I needed to feel like I still had control. The fountain stood at the center of the old financial district plaza, now mostly glass towers, and coffee chains disguised as boutiques. Nobody looked down anymore. Just up, into their phones. It hadn't changed since the early 2000s. Same cracked bass. Same slow drip from a chipped cherub's mouth. My father used to call it the leak in the city's throat. There were no cameras. That's why he liked it. At 5:32 p.m. I approached. Sat on the granite edge. Lit a cigarette. Let the smoke frame me like I had nothing to hide. When no one paid attention, I reached under the lip of the basin. Felt damp concrete. Then a ridge. My fingers found tape. Thin, fabric-backed. I peeled it away and pulled out a small, clear bag. Inside, 1 item. A photograph. Not digital. Glossy. Faded slightly at the corners. It showed a house I knew well, the lake property in Vermont, long sold. Summer, bright light. My father, standing beside an old Buick. And on the porch, blurred but visible, me. And next to me, my wife. Not recent. Not even close. Judging by the clothes, the photo was from before we met. Except that made no sense. Because I was in it. As I look now. I sat back. My hand trembled, not from fear, but calibration. Like my mind needed to rescan memory for something it never indexed. Was it fake? No. The paper was old. The gloss type hadn't been used in years. Someone had kept this. Hidden it. Waited. I returned to the hotel with the photo in my pocket. My wife texted around 9. Said she'd be late. Budget meeting. I stared at the message longer than I should have. She used no emojis. She never did. But suddenly, that felt like a choice, not a habit. I didn't reply. Because the image in my hand showed a truth my memory didn't. And someone wanted me to see it now. Not to warn me. To corner me. I didn't trust Labs. Labs kept records. Labs had staff. Instead, I went to someone who worked beneath systems. I found him in a basement studio in an old district lined with forgotten printing shops. The windows were opaque with years of dust and smoke. He didn't advertise anymore. He didn't need to. I rang once. The door buzzed. No words. Inside smelled like time, fixer fluid, old ink, mothballs, and bitter tea. He looked the same, sparse gray beard, permanent squint, a cardigan patched at the elbows with duct tape. He didn't greet me. Just took the photo, held it against the light box. No gloves. He turned it once. Twice. Then slid it into a scanner the size of a suitcase. We stood in silence. I heard the machine hum, scan, think. After a few minutes, he said, It's old. Late 90s paper. Emulsions authentic. Aging consistent. I nodded. That I already knew. But, he paused. This layer, here. He adjusted the contrast. On screen, the image looked like a ghost unraveling. Colors inverted. Grains distorted. In the porch window, barely visible, was a reflection. Not mine. Not hers. Someone standing inside the house. Short hair. Thin build. Holding what looked like a camera. Or something heavier. He said, "That part's been embedded. Not retouched. Rewritten. It's old, but someone burned this in after exposure, then sealed it back into the paper using analog recompression." I asked, "How many people can do that?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I left $500 in cash on his shelf and walked out before the machine finished cooling. Back in the hotel, I spread out everything I had. The signature. The photo. The emails. Each item had weight. But not direction. My wife texted again. Said she was staying with a colleague, easier for early meetings. I didn't believe her. But I didn't confront her. Because whoever was in that reflection had a reason to insert themselves into my past. And my mistake wasn't loving the wrong person. It was thinking I remembered how it all began. I didn't confront her. Not when the forensic trail led back to a name I once trusted, Eric Malin, former partner, quietly dismissed years ago for misreporting audits. He resurfaced through her, as if drawn to unfinished fractures. Not when I confirmed the footage from 6 months ago, her in a private office, late hours, not alone. Not even when I found their signed purchase agreement for a shell company, timed precisely to my next board cycle. Instead, I acted. I used every clause, every archived line of our prenup, every oversight she assumed I wouldn't notice. Her plan was clever. But she underestimated memory, especially mine. I froze 3 accounts. Retrieved escrowed shares through a trustee transfer she never saw coming. Flagged her company access citing breach of confidentiality. Served papers, with timestamps and evidence, through my attorney. By the time she realized it was done. The house? Sold to a restoration group I co-funded. Her car? Leased, not owned. The furniture? Held as assets in my name. She was left with her name. And even that, by week's end, was reduced to whispers among colleagues who now avoided her eyes. My son is 24. He chose to leave with me, not because I asked, but because, in his words, "You didn't lie to anyone." He understood more than I expected. I didn't explain everything. Just enough. We moved west. Coastal quiet. New structure. I write. He surfs. And on Wednesdays, we cook without phones nearby. And yes, there is someone else. Not younger. Just calm. She reads before speaking. Asks only once. Understands the difference between silence and avoidance. The woman who tried to betray me now lives alone. She calls sometimes. Leaves voicemails. I don't answer. My lawyer does. Because I don't need to scream that I won. I just needed to restore the truth. Quietly. Completely. She tried to steal a legacy. I rebuilt it. She lost her name. I kept mine. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, about real men who don't yell. They act. Coldly? To the end?